Hello, my little darklings. You know, it is said that behind every great man, there is a great woman. But I often wonder, in the shadow of great women, how many men are there and taking more of the credit? For years, I've been going to convention after convention and being faced with the same question. Why is there not more women represented in the paranormal field? Where can we find our leaders? Where can we find the women who speak for us, who can be a part of this? There's no names in this field, just a few fleeting names, and those names are gone now. But is that true? I don't believe it to be true. I go to conventions all the time where I sit along very strong, independent women in the paranormal field. Everything from cryptozoologists to paranormal investigators to some of the most talented and amazing mediums and psychics, witches, and more. Tonight, we're going to have an interesting conversation. My guest, Alex Matsuo, is going to join us, and we're going to talk with her about her brand new book, Women of the Paranormal. And I'm ashamed to admit, I don't know a lot of these names, and I should. Why is it that names like Hans Holzer, Dr. William Roll, and Ed Warren, first of all, and foremost, right? Why are these the names that seem to come to people's mind? D. Scott Rogo, Dr. Barry Taff. There are so many women out there that need to be talked about, that need to be heard. And I'm so glad that our guest has put together a book, volume 1, I might add, so that we can learn more about these amazing people and bring them to light so that you and all of our listeners across the world can learn that the place is for all of us in the paranormal field. And the field extends much further than your eye ever saw before. Stay tuned. Women of the Paranormal, that's next right here. I'm Dave Schrader, and this is my realm. This is the Paranormal 60.
I'm not gonna stand here and listen to this baloney.
You won't know. He doesn't stand for baloney.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Hello, my little darklings. Thank you again for joining me here. It is a brand new episode, and yes, we are live. I appreciate you spending some time with me. We're going to get to my guest in just a few moments. First, I wanted to begin by acknowledging the amazing paranormal conference, the Michigan Paracon number 13. I have been a guest to 12 of the 13. I missed the very first year, but I've been there every year since, and it is always an honor and a privilege to be there among all of you. And it's an honor and privilege that I do not take lightly, not in the slightest. I love meeting people. I love engaging with them. And for those of you that have seen me the past 11 years or 12 years of this conference doing the event, you'll know that I genuinely love the people. For those of you that attended, you might have noticed that I was a little standoffish and I was a little bit more reserved at points. I was not open about it at the conference as I didn't want a bunch of people coming to me to discuss it because I wasn't in the mental mindset to deal with that. But I feel that I owe you an apology because I know that there were some of you who felt that I was very standoffish at this event. I unfortunately awoke to news early on in the conference that I had lost a good friend to suicide. And it knocked me down pretty hard. One morning, I barely could get out of bed. It took me till I think almost noon or 1 o'clock before I even got to my table. And that was after many, many tears were shed and doing my best to keep my crying stifled so that the neighbors didn't think something was wrong. I'll alert the police. It was crippling to hear that. It's crippling on many different fronts, obviously, because of the tragic loss to suicide, but also in the fact that when you get to an age, when you start losing more friends than you make, it's tough. And especially when you start losing people that you've known most of your life. You always wonder, what is there that I could have done? That's kind of the survivor's guilt and remorse that sticks with us. So I apologize for not being the Dave many of you have grown accustomed to at this last event, and I hope that you'll forgive me this one time. But I want to thank all of you that came up. And as I say at every event, if you are in need of a hug, come see me anytime, day or night at this conference, and we will hug. And I got many hugs. And what many of you didn't know is you were actually helping me. You helped refill me and give me the energy to push forward every day and to continue to do what I love to do. So thank you from the very bottom of my heart. It was not an easy weekend, but you all made it survivable. And I could feel your love and your attention, and it made a world of difference. But I also want you to do me a favor and realize that there are other people out there silently suffering that just might need a hug as well. So never hold back on an offer to refill somebody's love cup and give them the affection and attention that they may need, because we don't know the burdens that each person we meet carry. And if you sense a great disturbance in the force, a hug is a great cathartic and healing thing. It's been proven that a hug can actually release endorphins of joy. So if somebody is open to receiving, be a giver. That's why I make the offer at every conference I attend. And I know you think I'm joking when I say I'll be handing out free hugs. I mean it, because there's a lot of you that need it, and many of you that open up to me and explain to me why you need it. So I hope that it was a reciprocal exchange on this trip. And thank you again for being there for me, even when you didn't know that you were. I also want to ask for a quick prayer and healing request. My children are not as open with a lot of the paranormal angles as I am, of course, and they don't necessarily like public announcements towards things. So I won't make it public in the sense of saying who or what is going on, but I will say that one of my grandchildren is in need of prayers and healing energy. So for any of you out there that work in that energy and work in a healing modality, and any of you that do pray to whatever entity or deity you believe in, I just ask that you send good vibrations, lots of love, lots of encouragement, strength for my family and for my grandchild. And I know that it will be delivered where it needs to be delivered. So thank you very much for considering doing that as well. I start off on kind of two kicks to the throat, but I do want to also recognize and acknowledge that today is Winnie Schrader's birthday. And she did something pretty extraordinary, something she's been doing for a long time, quietly and privately. She is finally coming out, stepping out on her birthday officially to announce that she is available to start doing tarot readings. The Love and Lotus Tarot with Winnie Schrader. You can find information by following the link that I have put right on today's program guide, or you can go to paranormal60.com. That's paranormal60.com, and you'll see the little tabs. Click the Love and Lotus tab and book your reading right now with Winnie Schrader. She's got a few different varieties and options for you to choose from. So help support her endeavors of coming out into the world with her gifts and allowing her to help you and maybe answer some questions that you might have. And happy birthday, Winnie. All right. Let's get started with the show. This is a good one. I'm excited to be talking to this woman. Women of the Paranormal, Volume 1, A Brief History, is a book that's out and available now. As a matter of fact, that book is linked in today's program guide. So make sure you check it out, order the book. And as I always say, not only order the book, but make sure that once you've read it, you come back, you rate and review the book. Joining us now on the program, the author, Alex Matsuo. Alex, thank you so much for being here with us and opening our eyes to this tonight.
Hey, Dave. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. We've run in the same circles for many years now, and I'm pleased that we're able to come together. And when I saw the topic of the book, I thought this was something I'd really like to highlight, because I do hear the disheartened pleas from people in the audience at events. And I will say that I do understand their point, but I also hope that they're not forgetting the many powerful women that do show up on a lot of these programs and are represented, maybe not in as many numbers as we would like to see, but there are very good, capable, strong women out there that are doing really good work in this field right now.
Oh, absolutely. There are some amazing women in the paranormal media space, the investigation field, the community in general. There's some amazing women out there right now, and as you mentioned, maybe not in the numbers that we would like to see, but there are some really incredible women out there already doing the work that definitely deserve to be celebrated.
As I'm looking through your book and through the information and at these names, I am woefully remiss in saying I don't know many of these names, nor do I know their stories. Obviously, I know, Linda Godfrey was a great friend of ours in our show. Rosemary Ellen Guiley as well. She was, I think, the second guest I ever had on my paranormal radio programs, and a wonderful woman that I'm sorry is no longer with us. But very few of the names echoed through. But it was so great and compelling to see that their stories are very deep. They're not a footnote in history,
Mhm.
that they are actually, in some instances, the biggest part of the story, with some of the bigger names we do recognize falling into the footnote category. When you start researching a book to do something like this and drag them out of the darkness and into the light and finally allow them to be seen, obviously you've got a lot, because this is titled Volume 1. How hard was it to pare it down to this is who we're going to cover in this round?
This was a challenge. So that is why there's a very weird number with volume one. It's 38, 38 women. I couldn't really decide who would go in volume one because I feel like they all had a really important role in this book. Um, when I started researching the book, I only had about uh, 12 women that I started with, and it quickly evolved into over 100. And these are all women who played a very significant role in the field, too. It wasn't just, a co-author on a journal. This was,
Right.
oh, they came up with some really compelling experiments, or even, move forward some of the methodologies that we use today that we didn't give them credit for. And so it was very eye-opening as more and more of these names were coming through, that and I would do my follow-up research, and I'm blown away of like, oh my gosh, why haven't I heard of her before? And there were several women in volume one that was like that.
I'm good friends with quite a few of the investigators that were out there, and I had a chance to. I was the last radio interview that Dr. Hans Holzer did, and I had a chance
Mhm.
to meet and work with Dr. William Roll in Savannah, Georgia, and Dr. Barry Taff has become a very good friend. And I feel bad because, like, even in Dr. Taff's position, this is a man a lot of people know and recognize from the entity case and the haunting in San Pedro and so much. But he actually studied under a woman that ran the parapsychology lab at UCLA.
Yep.
And here I sit, embarrassed in 2021 to be able to say the accolades of my friend Dr. Barry Taff, but I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the woman who was in charge of the parapsychology lab. And that's a shame. And there's nobody talking about that.
Right. Well, yeah. So, it's Thelma Moss. And
Right.
interestingly enough, I know of Thelma Moss because she was one of the co-founders of the Actors Studio. So that's where I knew the name. And then it was so funny because I had known about Barry Taff and Carrie Gaynor. Like, I knew about their work with the entity case and all the work that you mentioned. And then I found this old article from the Daily Bruin at UCLA that discussed, like, oh, UCLA used to have a parapsychology department. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I should read this article. And I about fell out of my chair when I saw the name Thelma Moss. I'm like, surely that's not the same Thelma Moss from the Actors Studio, Broadway actress Thelma Moss. Sure enough, it was. She had a little bit of a career change, but
Mhm.
that career change was one of the most pivotal ones, and she did a lot of really amazing work with the parapsychology department at UCLA that a lot of people don't even realize.
Right. And that is so shocking to me. And like I said, I guess, part of it is our fault. But when you talk to somebody who is there and is alive now and can share the stories, sometimes that's what keeps it alive, right? It's the oral tradition
Mhm.
of hearing these tales. And I associate it with Dr. Barry Taff. And
Yep.
he talks openly about Thelma Moss and talks openly about his career and working underneath her. And he was never trying to outshine her in any way, shape, or form. But again, because he's still alive and she is not, the story continues through him. So we see it through his tint. There's, her work in the field was extremely important. As a matter of fact, because of her work and what she was able to accomplish and the things that she thought of outside the box, that kept a lot of the financing coming in for the parapsychology department for a long time.
Absolutely. Had she not done the work that she did, especially when she was working with various celebrities, and, she did some stuff with Carol Burnett, which I found a very delightful story about that. I don't think the parapsychology department would have lasted as long as it did. So I think Thelma really did pioneer something really special at UCLA, and also, really cultivated some working relationships, like with Dr. Shafika Karagula, who also worked with other women as well. And it's just amazing just how much work Thelma did. And Dr. Taff has been very supportive of the book as well. And he was very excited when he found out Thelma was in the book. So it's really cool.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that obviously, in order to propagate this as an important field, we want to examine and break down things like, all right, Dr. Barry Taff, he went to UCLA, he's educated, he's doing this, he's doing that. There's no background in acting, there's no background in production. Do you think it's easier for people to say, well, this is a more believable character? I mean, Thelma Moss was an actress. She was behind. So do you think that there was any dismissive attitude towards that? Because I know that there have been people like Chris Williams and others that have been part of the modern day field that were involved in the paranormal, and they were summarily discounted for a long time because they were pretty and they had acting credits on their IMDb. So if they're an actor, they obviously can't be trusted.
Right. I think that could be a part of it. And actually, there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of people in the paranormal media space on TV who have theater backgrounds, who have acting backgrounds. And it's again, really interesting to see how they are treated versus how others are treated. I mean, I can name at least 2 or 3 off the top of my head of who I know, have theater degrees or even appeared off Broadway. And now they're doing more paranormal related stuff. But I don't think people should be so quick to discount it. I mean, because there's such a rich relationship between even just the theater space and the paranormal space, and how both areas were kind of a safe haven for marginalized groups. I've done a bit of an extensive study on that, on not just women, but also the LGBT community. How both of these spaces have become sort of a safe haven. And it's a bit interesting too, because I feel like the internalized misogyny of our society has kind of come through too, when there are men who have been in the theater space too, but their integrity is not being questioned.
Agreed. It is so strange to even in this day and in time. Alex, I'll say this. I was surprised. It's the 21st century, right? I mean, we're deep into the 21st century here. And I'm sitting at my table at Michigan Paracon, and I've brought books for people to buy, and there were some books on witches and witchcraft. And I had a few people approach my table with this concerned look on their face, and they said, Dave, what is with all this witch stuff, all this witch garbage coming up? Everybody's a witch now. And I said, oh, why do you say that? Well, they were killed because they were doing bad things and this and that. And I said, really? How do you know this? Well, because you in a lot of the movies they talk about all this. And I go, movies aren't real, right? And I said, are doctors witches? No. Are midwives witches? No. Okay, so are holistic practitioners witches? No. And I said, I see you've got a bag there with essential oils. Where'd you get that? And she said, I got it back there at one of the metaphysical tables. And I said, then you're a witch. And she just gave me this look. And I said, yeah, you want to know a secret? The witches were the first people that everybody went to when things got bad, when they needed to feel healthy, when they needed to heal. These people had the knowledge to help them. And where witchcraft came in was, Alex, she's a great witch. She helped me get rid of my warts. She helped me get rid of my headache. She helped me birth our child. But I've noticed how cool her property is. So if I If I call her a witch, I might get to take her property away from her. And this woman was surprised. She's like, what? That's not what it was about. I go, that is exactly what it was about. And as a matter of fact, if you go to Salem, they play up the witches there, but they do it in a way that it's glorifying what you think of, and then they educate you to the real stories behind these cases. And in these cases, it's the women, and they go all the way back through history, time and tide. The women were the ones that the men and families went to for this information. Then I throw out the fact to her, there's something called women's intuition. You don't hear about male intuition. You hear about female intuition. Why? Because maybe there's something to it. Maybe women are more tapped into this, and we should respect their insights and ideas in how this should be presented. And these two women, I felt horrible for them at the end of it, because I felt like I just berated them on their lack of knowledge. But both of them were like, God, I guess I need to read more about witches. I said, please do educate yourself and realize that these are the people that we built modern medicine on. And do you know that the medicines we take today were considered magic back in those days? The concept that we could give somebody a little white pill that will make them walk upright and straight and not hurt, and their joints no longer swell, that's witchcraft. That's magic. And that's all it is. Alchemy is creating something from something else. And like I said, it took me off my guard, because holy cow, here's women that don't have any real concept of what women do in the paranormal and how integral and important they've been throughout.
Yeah. Yeah. And even so, it's like and women are more than just, not just, but more than, the witches or the intuitives, the empaths, they're also very effective investigators. They can certainly, I know a lot of women who lead teams. I lead a team as well. And I guess I didn't realize at the time, like when I started my team, how groundbreaking it was, to have a woman that was starting a team and running a team. And, but I started noticing as I was getting more acclimated to the paranormal community, my first name is Alex. That's a gender neutral name. Most people kind of lean on that's a boy's name. I can't tell you how many times people have told me my name is a boy's name, and I'm like, sorry. Like,
tell Alexandra Holzer that, right?
Right. And, and people would be surprised when they would see me or hear me talk, and they're like, oh, you're female. I'm like, yeah, is that shocking? Is that a surprise? And it turned out to be a surprise. I noticed that the way I would get treated also changed a little bit to almost like, well, is there not the equivalent of, is there a man in the house I can talk to? But it was like, oh, is there someone else, that you work with, meaning like, are you totally doing this by yourself? And I always thought that was interesting. And that was very early, after I started my team. But it was right about when the paranormal field was coming across as very male dominated, especially, media wise. I will say, as critical as I've been about diversity in paranormal TV, it is improving. It is definitely improving. And like you mentioned, maybe not as quickly as we'd like to see it, but it's getting there. So, and I have some hope now. I'm a bit more optimistic now about the representation in paranormal TV because of it. So I can see the landscape is changing.
All right. We're going to have to go to a quick break. Before we do that, and I want to definitely hear some of these stories, I do want your opinion on this. I've had people ask me, and I've been on panels with Aaron Ryder and Jael DePardo and Chris Williams and Amy Bruni, and I've sometimes stepped up to say that I think part of the reason that there is not more female representation is because a lot of female fans are brutal. They're brutal to the women. And I watch on social media, there are very few that seem to come through unscathed. Cindy Kaza is one of them, which I'm so happy for because she's so talented. But I watch comments like, she's so fat and dumpy. Why is she on? I'm better looking. I should be on that show. Or, oh, she's so pretty. She obviously slept her way to get on that show. And I think, well, how dismissive of you to just think this. And then I've told them, I said, and if you want more female representation, be aware that networks are watching what you say. And when there's nothing but vitriol and vinegar being spewed at the females, and I can be a fat, bald, gray-haired 55-year-old paranormal investigator, and nobody's bringing those aspects up. Some people bring those aspects up, but not nearly as bad as it happens for women. I said, if you want more female representation, start representing each other better. Start showing the love, and don't worry about what they look like. Don't worry. That's irrelevant. Honestly, tear them apart because they get on there and they're complete morons and idiots, just like you would to any other guy that would be on there. But if they're a woman and they're strong and they're independent and they're doing their thing, applaud them. Give them the encouragement, whether you like their looks or not, or think that you're better looking or could offer more. If you want that opportunity, the best way to do it is by showing support, because if networks see that there's a lot of support behind women investigators, they will bring on more women investigators. Yep. Am I being too harsh?
No, you're not. And you bring up a great point. This seems like the standards that women have to meet in order to be accepted in public, in the media, is grossly disproportionate. Women are criticized by our looks, and the fact that we do it to each other too. And that's just the result of being part of a misogynistic society, where we have been raised to value a woman by how she looks and what her looks can offer, and not necessarily what her brain can offer or what she can do just as herself. It's quite vicious, especially when I see the fat shaming on there, and like, oh, she's not wearing like the right clothes, or her clothes are too tight, clothes are too loose. Like, we can't win. We absolutely cannot win.
Right. What does any of that have to do with what you're there to do? Get past what they're wearing, get into this. Like, I think Heather Taddy is one of the most eclectic looking women I've ever seen when she goes out. And I would never question her ability or passion for the paranormal because she wears quirky, cool outfits. And I don't understand why that should even have any part of it. I can go in a shirt and a bolo tie, which hasn't been cool since the 80s, and I don't get picked on for that. But she can come in something and be picked on for looking like a Barbie doll, and she hasn't. I'm just using that as an example. But it's just so disheartening to me to watch that unspool. And I do think that that's unfortunately been the way it's been categorized. We've seen so many movies, biopics of very strong women who have had to stand in the shadow, even though they're the force behind the move of what actually took place. And we can't sell this art if your name's on it, Alex, but your buddy Dave, he's got a name. So let's give Dave your art. He'll put his name on it. You'll get your percentage. He'll get his. And that's how it's been done. Authors, researchers, investigators, you've written this amazing theory and thesis, but nobody's going to publish it under Alex. But Paranormal Dave Schrader, he's done TV. He's got a radio show. We'll put his name as the author. You're the co-author. It'll get out there either way. And that truly is. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. That is how this happens quite often. Very often.
And the women in the book, they've been victim of that, especially with Rose Mackenberg, Harry Houdini's second in command. She only worked with Houdini for 2 years, but she ended up really carrying his torch and his legacy. And then it's Houdini who got a lot of the credit for the work posthumously, which is pretty amazing to think about. So it happens, and it still happens. And I think that's why too, we have yet to see a TV show that has a female leading the cast, and like truly leading a show and leading a cast. I mean, like I said, we're getting there. It's getting better. But, can we think of any TV shows where the woman is the driver, she's the star vehicle of the show without the need of having like a male co-star? We don't have a female version of Zach Bagans. You know what I mean?
Right. Not yet. Not yet. But Teresa Caputo sure is trying. Let's take just a quick break. We'll come back. We've got more to discuss right here on the Paranormal 60. Hey guys, Phenomicon is right around the corner, September 6th through the 9th in Vernal, Utah. You keep asking, when am I going to be out that way? Well, I'm going to be out that way September 6th through the 9th, Vernal, Utah, for one of the best premier paranormal conferences. Cryptozoology, ufology, UAPology, I don't even know if that's a thing yet, and the paranormal. We're going to all be together sharing ideas, thoughts, and more. And I hope that you'll be a part of it. You can get information about Phenomicon. That's again, September 6th through the 9th in Vernal, Utah by going to paranormal60.com. Later on in the month, the Great Lakes Paranormal Conference, and you will get a chance to see some of the best women in the paranormal field right now, including my good friend Sarah Lemos from Ghost Town Terror. And season 2 is coming up of that show on Travel Channel and on Discovery Plus. So please make sure you watch and love that show so that you can keep it going. Sherry D. Benedetti from Ghost Hunters is going to be on hand as well. And there are many other fantastic guests. Medium psychic Diet Renee will be there. Christina Bloom will be there. And then you've got the Jason Hawes, Adam Berries, Shane Pittmans, and me, Dave Schrader, will be on hand as well. That's at the old Glen Beulah School in Glen Beulah, Wisconsin. That's September 22nd through the 24th. And then at the end of September, a walk in the past, September 30th, 2023, we'll be investigating the Horridge House and Vinton Train Depot in Vinton, Iowa with Josh Hurd. I hope you'll come on out and join Josh and I for a great weekend and a bunch of amazing investigations. And then don't forget this Halloween, if you're still looking for something to do, Halloween weekend, the Haunted Shanley Hotel in Napanoch, New York awaits you. I'll be there. Scotty the Medium will be there. We're going to be investigating together in this classic old haunted hotel, and we want you to be a part of it. Go check it out. Check out all of the upcoming events and make sure that you attend them with us. That's all at paranormal60.com or go to darknessevents.com. Darknessevents.com. The links are right in today's program guide. Our guest is here with us to talk about her book, and now we're going to start dipping into some of these amazing people through history. Women of the Paranormal, Volume 1, A Brief History. Alex Matsuo is here with us. All right, Alex, going back, what's the furthest? Was that a spirit I just saw across your screen? Or are you being...
There's another one.
Yeah, a catastrophe is taking place. You saw that happen to me before the show began. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's going to be attacked throughout the show by our furry feline friends. But how far back were you able to uncover some names that people might not have known about? And who are these remarkable women?
So the earliest one I found, the earliest one, I'm not 100% sure the story actually happened. So she's actually a honorable mention in the book.
Okay.
It's quite a long name, though. It's a long French name. So her name is Antoinette de la Garde de Choulez. She was a French poet. I know it's a mouthful, right? Even for the French. She was a French poet. She lived in the 1600s, and her story is actually quite fun. So she was going to stay with some friends, and she went to she was going to be a guest at a castle. So, because that's what people did in 1600s France.
Sure, yeah.
And one of her hosts mentioned, one of the rooms is not available because it's believed there's a ghost there. And Antoinette's like, that room, that's the one I would like to stay in, please. And her hosts were like, oh, no. You don't understand. Every time people stay in this room, there's paranormal activity. Things are being knocked over, and it's just this truly terrifying experience. And again, Antoinette's like, that room, please. And eventually the host had to say, okay, we'll let you do it, but we're not liable for anything that happens. And so Antoinette, goes into the haunted room. Night falls. She blows out the candle for lights out, and then she starts to hear something moving around in the room. She can't see what it is because the room is pitch black. And eventually she feels something, like she reaches out and grabs something furry. And she's like, okay, I'm just going to hang on to it for the rest of the night. And then the next morning comes and she finds that it's a dog. It was a dog that was going into the room. But the fact that a story like that is tied to a female at that time, the story really became popular in the 1800s. But the fact that that story is tied to a female, with using critical thinking and reasoning and, wanting to go in and debunk something, I thought was really cool. So she's an honorable mention. dating back to the 1600s. But the next one I found, the next earliest one would be Catherine Crowe. And she mainly did her work in the 1800s. She was quite a remarkable human being. Not a lot is known about her early life, but we know that she did marry at a young age. She was in a very unhappy marriage, and she actually had to ask for help to get out of the marriage. And after that, she moved to Edinburgh, Scotland. She ended up making a life for herself as a writer. She wrote plays. She wrote novellas, mysteries, featuring female leads as the main character, which is pretty amazing. But her biggest contribution, I think, and I believe it's truly one of the biggest contributions she made to the field, was when she published The Night Side of Nature in 1848. She was the one who introduced the words poltergeist and doppelganger into English usage. Yeah. So she's
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So she actually did a lot of research, and a lot of the phenomena she describes in Night Side of Nature, we would describe it today as like ESP, poltergeist activity, out of body experiences, psi, near-death experiences, crisis apparitions. She did quite a lot of research, especially in Germany. Hence, how she found the words doppelganger and poltergeist. But she's the one who really brought that into mainstream usage that we would know today. And to me, I feel like Catherine is one of the most overlooked figures in the paranormal field, because she contributed so much. And whenever I read history books, especially ones that bring up poltergeists, I'm like, oh, do they mention Catherine at all? And a lot of times they don't. And she was the one who really was the first to bring these words to us and define them for an English speaking world.
Right. And what paranormal discussion could we have where doppelgangers and poltergeist are not brought into it at some point? And looking back at it, I know there are quite a few thinkle, nice word, Dave. I'm going to trademark that.
I love it.
Yeah, I like to thinkle a little in the morning. There are many people who think that Dr. Hans Holzer coined the phrase poltergeist. I'm like, no, first of all, it predates him, but it's just ridiculous that people don't realize kind of the life of where these stories come from and where these words come from. And I guess it's easy because he was Austrian, and those are definitely words that sound German or Austrian in nature. So it'd be easy to ascribe them to somebody like that. But here we've got the fascination. What about this? Is there something that we've lost in translation between her accounts and investigations into those and what we claim them to be or understand them to be now?
Right. Well, and that's a good question too, because there's another thing that Catherine did that was fairly significant contribution to the field as well. She may have conducted one of the earliest paranormal investigations as we know it today. And I'm not talking about exorcisms like, that were done by the church. I'm not talking about Athena Doris, which again, that's another story that may or may not have actually happened. But, again, Athena Doris wasn't necessarily doing a paranormal investigation. So Night Side of Nature went through 16 print runs in her life. That's pretty significant. So she garnered this reputation as being like, this spooky, paranormally minded person. And in 1859, she published a book called Ghosts and Family Legends. And each chapter is a story because the setting is at a party, and each person at this party is sharing a story. And at the end, they're asking Catherine, hey, can you share a story with us? And she tries to avoid the subject and says like, you can look at Night Side of Nature if you want to hear something spooky. And they said, no, we want to hear something that And she ended up she writes about in this chapter, a paranormal investigation as we know it today, that she did for this Scottish man by the name of Mick N. That's all we know him as. But she gathers a small group of investigators to go with her. She brings a psychic medium. She doesn't tell the medium why the real reason why they're there. She tells the medium that she's thinking of buying the house and would love to know what the medium thinks of the house. And so the medium does her walkthrough. Catherine stays quiet about any reports of hauntings, which is something we do today. You know, a lot of times when we bring in psychic mediums, we don't tell them anything. And then her psychic medium friend says, you shouldn't buy this house. There's something weird going on. And Catherine says, okay, tell me more. And so the medium shares the backstory of the house. Like, I think, people may have died here and X, Y, and Z. And then they stay and do a paranormal investigation and they hear strange sounds. Catherine records it all. They, the psychic medium starts to see light anomalies and tells Catherine to grab her hand, and Catherine grabs her hand, and then Catherine can see the light anomalies too. And Catherine is writing very detailed notes about the phenomena. She interviews witnesses. There's a lot going on here that she did that I'm sitting here reading this chapter and I'm thinking, holy cow, this is what we do today. And this is the very foundation that helped inspire the framework for the Society for Psychical Research as well. So
huge. That's huge. I bring up Dr. Hans Holzer, obviously, because I'm associated with him so closely because of the Holzer files. I will challenge our viewers and listeners to do me a favor. Go to season 2 of the Holzer files and watch the episodes. And in one of the episodes, we actually reveal a very important lesson about who gave Dr. Hans Holzer his start. And you might be surprised to find out the name of the person when you go in. It wasn't another male professor. It wasn't a male colleague. So go in and educate yourself. I don't want to give you any more information. I want you to do it. Go watch it and see the episode for yourself. But again, talking about strong people, here is Hans Holzer. He was world renowned and looked upon so highly. But do you know who he leaned on? In the interview I did with him, Alex, talking to him almost 18 years ago, everything that I talked to him about, his answer came back, you need a good trance medium, right? It was, what do you think of the new technology? Nah, it's garbage. You need a good trance medium, someone that knows their things and is trustworthy and blah, 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 and amazing. That's why he worked with Ethel Johnson Myers, Sybil Leek, Marissa Anderson, and more. There were so many other names associated with the paranormal that and mediums and psychics, and he trusted them implicitly to help him get the information because he trusted their intuition. And a lot of people don't know this, but not only did Hans Holzer write books about ghosts, he wrote books about witches. And Hans Holzer was a witch. He was part of that culture and loved it and embraced it and embraced the women that were part of it and knew how capable and strong they were. So there's a lot you don't know about the men that lead our field. So educate yourselves on those things because there are some amazing books and you'll see the reverence in which Dr. Holzer holds these people. Yet he's the name we all know and remember. Right?
Pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, but go check it out. In season 2 of this series, we crack open his first case, which wasn't even his case. He was asked as a guest to come witness this. And when he was on the case and his intuition and his uncanny ability as a journalist to pick up on things, the woman that was leading the investigation encouraged him to move forward. And lo and behold, his career took off. So again, she knew the intuition was there. She could see the spark of what was there as well. Yet, unfortunately, sometimes that spark is the one that's forgotten to history. So I hope you guys will consider checking that out. Who else have you got for us? Tell me another great admission in this book. And then we will take a quick break and we'll come back and cover some more.
I would say Gertrude Schmeidler. She was another one, and a little bit more of a modern one too, but she's the one who came up with the sheep-goat experiment, which is probably one of the most incredible experiments in terms of parapsychology, and the whole concept of seeing is believing. So she separated people into 2 groups. You had the sheep, so people who believed in ESP and psi, and then you had the goats, the ones who didn't believe. And she put both groups through rigorous experiments to see with whether it was through Xener cards or through different psi games and ESP abilities and whatnot. And she found that the sheep group had higher hits than the goat group, which
Interesting.
which is one of the most compelling experiments, I think, in the parapsychology field, where it's like, if you believe in it and you're sure of it, you could possibly manifest this yourself or be able to accomplish much more. And I have to say that experiment heavily inspired me too, made me a slightly less cynical.
Right.
But just reading about that, and these were experiments put through a very compelling system of tests and peer reviews. And yeah, I mean, and Gertrude's chapter is fairly short, but I feel like with just that information overall, she really took off with parapsychology and ESP, and ended up working with JB Ryan quite a bit.
Mhm.
Quite a bit. I mean, she was inspired by JB Ryan, and then she sprouted her wings and flew, and this experiment is probably, I'll put my stake in the ground, I feel like it's one of the most important experiments in terms of parapsychology and the paranormal.
Read about it, folks. How do you read about it? Well, that's a great question. Why don't you pick up the book Women of the Paranormal, Volume 1, A Brief History. Alex Matsuo is our guest tonight, and we are going to talk more with her. People are asking in the chat room, I see it's Volume 1. Does that mean there's more? Oh, there's going to be more. So if you know of a woman in the paranormal that's maybe been overlooked, I bet you could send a message to Alex so that she can do more research and information on that. But how? How could you find Alex? Oh, I know. I've made it very simple. There's a link for Alex and her website on today's program guide. Go check it out, educate yourself, and we'll be back with more right after this.
Haunted Magazine, issue 38, Hot Summer Frights, is an electrifying edition that will send shivers down your spine. Dive into a world where history and mystery, the normal and the paranormal, intertwine. In the latest edition, we look at the Hell House hauntings, the terror of the Warminster Thing, the Borley Rectory, sin eating in Shropshire, and just what the heck is the Grampus? You can find our magazine at the website hauntedmagazineprintshop.com and selected outlets in the UK, Canada, Australia, and the United States. So grab your copy today. And remember, kids, don't be normal, be paranormal.
Are you like so many others, coming into abilities that you don't understand and unsure where to safely begin this journey of exploration? Well, award-winning psychic and medium Michelle Welch has the answers. Michelle Welch is the author of the award-winning book, The Magic of Connection. Stop cutting cords and learn to transform negative energy to live an empowered life. In this book, you'll learn how spirituality and intuition can help you heal your inner wounds while staying connected to the people that you love. Author Michelle Welch shows you how to work with the energies that connect all people, and you'll learn to transform and transmute negative energy in ways that support your personal spiritual journey and help you reach a more powerful and meaningful life. In her newest book, Spirits Unveiled, a fresh perspective on angels, guides, ghosts, and more, Michelle teaches you how to identify and deal with the spiritual energy around you every day. Each chapter features a specific kind of spirit and teaches you how to sense its presence, identify and connect with it, and set the boundaries you may need, all while demystifying the process and making it easy and accessible to everyone, from the beginner to the expert. You'll learn how to understand elementals, connect with an ascended master, protect against psychic attacks, astral travel, and more. Providing meditations, visualizations, and inspiring stories, this book helps boost your intuition and spiritual experience. Unleash the real you. Get the books, The Magic of Connection, Stop Cutting Cords and Learn to Transform Negative Energy to Live an Empowered Life, and Spirits Unveiled, a fresh perspective on angels, guides, ghosts, and more. Buy them now wherever you purchase your books or by using the link on today's program guide. Life is confusing enough. Why not make it easier with award-winning help from Michelle Welch?
Join us for this amazing paranormal conference that's being held in a haunted school in Glen Beulah, Wisconsin. Haunted Midwest Ghost Tours presents Great Lakes Paranormal Conference on September 22nd through the 24th, 2023. We have some great speakers with Jason Hawes, Adam Berry, Sherry D. Benedetti, Lyle Blackburn, Shane Pittman, Sarah Lemos, Dave Schrader, Jeff Bellinger, along with Wisconsin's very own Chad Lewis, and many more will make this one of Wisconsin's most talked about events. We have over 40 vendors and nighttime investigations at various haunted locations with special guests. Get your tickets now at GreatLakesParanormalConference.com and find us on Facebook under the same name. Choose from VIP, General 3-Day, and Day Pass. Again, that's GreatLakesParanormalConference.com.
We are back. Women of the Paranormal. Our topic tonight on the program, Volume 1, A Brief History, is out and available now. We have a link for that on today's program guide, or you can go right to Alex's website link and order it directly there. Alex, again, thank you so much for doing the show and spending the entire hour with me. I usually like to break it up over the hour with a couple of different guests, but because we have so many different great people to speak about, it's a fresh moment every time you open your mouth to share a new story. So who are we going to talk about next?
Let's talk about Mary Hyre.
Okay.
If you are familiar with John Keel and the Mothman prophecies,
Mm-hmm.
Mary Hyre was probably one of the most instrumental figures for John Keel. In fact, I don't think that Mothman prophecies and all the research that was done on Mothman Point Pleasant and Men in Black, I don't think it would have come to quite the fruition that it did if it had not been for Mary Hyre. In fact, Mary Hyre passed right before the Mothman Prophecies was published, and he put in this really heartfelt dedication to her, and she was his pulse check on Point Pleasant. She had gained the trust. I mean, she was a local, so the locals trusted her with their stories when they experienced Mothman or the Men in Black or any of the other weird things that was happening in Point Pleasant in the 60s. And it was thanks to Mary Hyre that John Keel was able to get a lot of these interviews and know exactly what was happening in Point Pleasant at the time, because Mary Hyre would give him a call and say, "Hey, there's something going on. You might want to head over here." And she was his right-hand person too, and she was a very important part of that whole story.
It's great to hear the way these women, and understand we're just scraping the surface of these stories, folks. There's so much more in the book, and you get a lot more detail and fleshed out information about these amazing women. I asked Alex to come on and just give us spoonfuls of information so that you can understand some of these names that you've never heard before or may have heard in passing but have no understanding or knowledge of. I mentioned Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and sadly it's been a few years since her passing, and I have unfortunately never been able to have her on this iteration of my podcast, which is heartbreaking because she was such an integral part of this. She wrote, I think it was like over 100 books on the paranormal before her passing.
Something like that. Yeah. I had interviewed her husband for the book, and he was very supportive of the project. And I asked him, I said, "Did you ever figure out like what the final count was for her books?" And he said it's probably over 100. So, thank you.
Over 100, and then reprinted in many languages and on many different TV shows, Supernatural, the Charmed TV series, and so on. There have been editions of Rosemary's books on the shelves behind some of the main characters during episodes, and that's because she wrote the encyclopedias. She wrote the books that really got into this. I used to call her the Queen of the Nighttime World on my show because she knew it all. We could have her on. I'd say, you know what? Tonight, Rosemary, I want to talk about dreams and dream interpretation and the
Oh
paranormal.
yeah.
And she could pick it up like that and run with it. She wrote the books about it. And I will tell you, she schooled me and dressed me down about my ignorance towards the fae and the fairy realms, right? To me, it was one day she was going to talk to me about fairies. I'm like, I don't know about that, Rosemary. And she goes, why not? And I said, that gets kind of stupid, doesn't it? And she goes, so let me get this straight. You can talk about butthole probing aliens, and that's a possibility. You could talk to me about a giant bipedal hairy hominid walking in the woods, where the best picture we have is a blurry deal, and that's acceptable to you. You'll tell me about ghosts and demons, and that's acceptable. But the fact that the fae, which people still believe in today, as a matter of fact, there are roads in many different countries that have to be rerouted, passageways that have to be changed so that they don't interfere with fairy circles, fairy mounds, troll hills, and the belief systems of those people. So you're telling me that's the line you're going to draw? And I heck on my heels, I said, you're right. What a weird place to draw the line. She goes, Dave, what we are investigating and what we are involved in is an open-minded resource. We have to think of everything. And when you get the big picture, Dave, you're going to see that there are threads that when you start to pull, these are going to all come together. And she was so dedicated to that in her life and bringing those threads together to show us the jinn and the fae and aliens and vampires and ghosts. And she did it so eloquently.
She really did. She really did. I had the pleasure of meeting her once, and it was like about a couple years before she passed. It was actually one of her last events, and she spoke about mirror scrying, and I was completely captivated. And literally, like, I sat with her for hours. And what I really appreciate about her was she was so giving of her time. And that was something that a lot of her friends mentioned when I interviewed them. They said, Rosemary was always very generous with her time. She would never tell somebody like what they were talking about was stupid or she wasn't interested. Like, she would sit and listen. She would sit and listen to every detail and ask questions. And she was a very impressive human being. And it's a shame that she wasn't better known, while she was here. And I interact with a lot of the younger generation, like on TikTok, and
Right.
I'll mention Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and they're like, "Who?" I'm like, "Get on Amazon." I have my list of what books you can start with. You need to read Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and hopefully, by just speaking her name and recommending her work, keeping her legacy alive. Hopefully, working on it.
Rosemary and I connected back in 2006 at UNIVCon in Pennsylvania,
wow.
at Penn State. And
Yeah.
we hit it off. She was so kind, like you said. And we just were talking in the lobby the one day, and she was about to go lead her psychometry session to teach people psychometry. And she saw the roll of the eyes as I kind of like, okay. And then she said, come with me, Dave, you have abilities. And I'm like, Rosemary, I'm as sensitive as a doorknob. She goes, no, come with me. Just give me an hour of your time. And I said, okay. I said, you've been kind enough to answer my questions and hang out with me about what I wanted to talk about. Let's go see. So we went in, and I went in, and understand this, folks, I was putting up a wall. I was wanting her to be so wrong. And this is so stupid. I'm going to hold something and, flashes of memories. And she gave us an introduction, talked to us about how psychometry works, walked us through these moments. And then she put us in little groups. And it was groups of 3 people, and she picked people randomly from the audience to put together. And unbeknownst to her, a husband and wife were sitting apart from each other. She put them together with me. And it really was a kind of a cool experiment, because as we're sitting there, we each handed something to each other that belonged to one of us. And I got the man's wedding ring, and I'm holding it. And, I'm going through the exercise, deep breathing, kind of closing my eyes, just allowing. She goes, I want you to just open your mind to whatever random images come out and state them. These 2 are going to write them down. So they did that for me. I did that for them. And I'm like, all right, whatever comes to mind. They're like, yeah. I said, okay, I see a big sweaty glass of iced tea. It looks like it belongs in a commercial because it's perfect. It's dripping down the sides. You can see the sun almost reflecting through it. And now I'm seeing road construction, and there's some real anger, road construction. I'm going through this, and I get done, and I felt like a complete jackass. I'm like, none of these things are iced tea, road construction, this yellow blanket. And I get done and I go, did any of this make sense? And he turns to his wife and he goes, did any of that make sense, honey? And she's like, holy shit. And she goes, you don't know this. She goes, that's my husband. And so obviously we were excited to see the reading you would give us because we already know each other too well and wanted to see what we could do for you in exchange. So I told him, she goes, all he drinks is iced tea. He drinks it morning, noon, and night, summer, winter, fall. That's all he drinks is iced tea. And he has been livid because they started a little road construction project on the street that we live on. And it has been going on for 4 months and it's driving him insane. And I'm like, how is this possible? And then he had bought her this beautiful yellow blanket on their last vacation that he had given to her. Mind blown. And I just looked up at Rosemary as we're exchanging this, and she looks at me and she goes, that's a pretty sensitive doorknob, Dave Schrader, don't you think? And I go, yep, you're right. And we did to her grace. We had a falling out at one point because she was given some incorrect information and believed that I was falling under the misogynistic and ageist category. I had hired her for events for 7 years, and it just blindsided me that she had this approach. After a few years of not talking, truth came out, and to her complete and utter ability, she reached out, which had to be hard, and she apologized and said, I'm sorry I believe that about you. And I'm sorry that I took the words of somebody else because I knew who you were. And, I joked with her and I said, aren't you supposed to be sensitive? She goes, sometimes, Dave, our own ego gets in the way. And when things don't always go the way we want, it's a lot easier to believe that maybe somebody is against us than it is to believe that maybe somebody's lying to us. And we just had this great coming back, and we ended up reconnecting near the end of her life. And she reappeared on my shows, and it was just a nice friendship. And she was sweet to my mom, who came to all the events, and my mom adored her. So she was truly a really special person. And I'm glad that reconnection happened as well. And she was one of the strongest. Pick up the books, folks. You owe it to yourself. If you want some of the best books on all aspects of the paranormal, Rosemary Ellen Guiley is a way to go. So is Alex. She's got a brand new book. I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but it's called Women of the Paranormal, Volume 1, A Brief History, and it's in today's program guide. The link is there, as well as the link to Alex's website. Alex, let's go out on one more story, one of these other perhaps unsung heroes of the female paranormal world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned her very briefly, but we can do a deeper dive into Rose Mackenberg, who is a very fun one. So Rose Mackenberg, well, I guess in order to talk about Rose Mackenberg, we all know who Harry Houdini is. And he was a very instrumental person when it came to debunking fraudulent mediums. What a lot of people don't know is that he had essentially a small army of secret agents. So whenever he went on tour, he would send these secret agents out a couple weeks before to essentially feel out, these psychic mediums and see who was fraudulent or who was sketchy. And one of his most prominent secret agents was Rose Mackenberg, also known as Mac. And what I really enjoy about Mac was she would wear disguises. She had different personas that she would take on. And the names of these personas crack me up. Like, she would have a Francis Roud with the initials F Roud, and it would spell out fraud.
That's awesome.
Or Alicia Bunk, all is bunk. And so she would take on these personas. I mean, she had like at least a dozen different personas she would take on. Like, there was the grieving widow. There was several like different.
I'm sure the sister, the mother, the
mother, exactly. Right. The spinster, all these different characters she would take on. And sadly, because she was a woman in the early 20th century, she was put at risk by some of the more sketchier male mediums. She was often propositioned in exchange for enlightenment or to make contact with the masters, just these really sketchy things. But she was also assaulted a couple times, and Houdini actually encouraged her to carry a weapon with her, and she's like, no, it's fine. She also testified before Congress when there was a bill coming up that would essentially ban fortune telling in the United States. She was a witness and actually revealed that President Calvin Coolidge and his cabinet and senators at the time were attending table tipping sessions and seeing psychic mediums, and essentially the Senate floor erupted with "No, I didn't," and it was this huge thing. Believe it or not, though, she only worked with Houdini for about 2 years because Houdini passed away. But she's the one who continued his legacy, and she continued to debunk fraudulent mediums. I mean, and it was in the thousands of how many she debunked by the time her career was over. But it's always Houdini who gets like the credit for all of those debunkings, when really it was Rosemary who was still carrying on that torch and that legacy, it was Rose Mackenberg who was carrying on that legacy. So it was really she was really quite incredible. And apparently she always did sleep with the light on at towards the end of her life because she was tired of dark rooms. So
now there was a very famous, I think her name was Marjorie, right? The medium that Harry Houdini couldn't break. And here's a woman, a very powerful person in the paranormal field at the time. Do you cover Marjorie by any chance in the book, or will she be in volume 2?
Volume 2.
All right. Volume 2.
Yeah.
Excellent. We also had a question from the audience. Will you, is Lorraine Warren covered in this book?
She is, yeah. And Lorraine, I actually went back and forth about, because Lorraine was already really famous. But I ended up talking to John Zaffis quite a bit about Lorraine because, I was, let's get to know Lorraine as a person. And I was really trying to find, anything about Lorraine's story that would stand out to me. And I found, and this is actually what ultimately convinced me to put her in volume 1 of the book, was seeing how she was treated by the media in the 60s and 70s, how she was treated versus how Ed was treated. And a lot of it was, you're a wife and you're a mother. How could you be going around and doing this ghost and demon stuff? You're a wife and mother. You should be home. And by that point, Judy was her daughter Judy was an adult, but she was getting criticized for doing what she was doing. But Ed was not. And I'm like, well, Ed's a husband and father. Why is not he put up to the same scrutiny? And ultimately, that's why I put Lorraine in the book, because even as famous as she was, and even towards the end of her life, creating this incredible legacy for, making sure that she and Ed, reached a form of immortality, she had to work her butt off, and especially to maintain her credibility as not just a wife and mother, but also a psychic medium, but especially as just a human being in general. She really had to defend herself much more than Ed had to.
Before we go, I'm just curious, when I throw out like the Fox sisters, right? Now here you've got 2 women that had remarkable abilities, things that would happen around them. It was believed that they were debunked eventually, that they were found to be frauds, but yet they captivated the world, right, with what they were able to do. And I don't want to give much away, but putting that out there, then it to me reflects to the Enfield poltergeist case, where you've got these 2 sisters, very much like the Fox sisters, that are embroiled in this poltergeist activity, in this channeling. And do you think that it got to a point where the expectations were so high on these women that at points they had to fake things in order to make the rest seem like it was real? Because, well, I was there and nothing happened. Because that seems like a lot of pressure. I know, just taking people on ghost hunts, they watch me on TV, I get evidence. Well, I spent $200 to go on a weekend and investigate with Dave. We didn't get anything. Well, that's not how it works. I do my best. I try to engage the spirits. Yeah. And I feel that pressure when I'm there doing these things, not to fake it, but I can feel the pressure of, boy, I don't want to disappoint. And I sure hope the spirits are willing to communicate. Do you think that both of these sets of sisters ended up getting kind of a bad rap because of the expectations being set way too high on them for what paranormal activity truly was?
I think so. I mean, especially when you talk about the Enfield poltergeist these were also young girls, young kids. And, they had these scientists from SPR observing them. And I'm sure there was some sort of pressure to, well, these people are here. We should probably make sure something happens. And with the Fox sisters, I mean, they had a lot on the line. I mean, they essentially started a whole new religion. Probably didn't mean to start a religion, but it
Right.
did start a religion, a worldwide phenomena. And also they had a sister. They had their eldest sister who may or may not have had their best interests at heart.
Mhm.
And I think there was a lot of pressure to continue to perform, so to speak, and also keep going with, what was essentially paying the bills. And again, under the pressure of a sister who, again, may or may not have had their best interests at heart. I mean, Leah Fox, the eldest sister, was documented saying, "I don't want to go back to piano lessons." And so, there was a lot riding on the line. And I have mixed feelings about the Fox sisters too. I do believe that something legit happened, but I feel like there may have been some fabrication too. But regardless, they taught not just their generation, but they taught future generations how to communicate with the dead. And I think that's
Right.
the most important thing there.
We're still using that communication. Knock twice if you're there, right?
Yep.
Give us a sign. Knock once for yes, twice for no. That's what they were doing all those years ago. So that we mock them and ridicule that what fakes and frauds they are, but yet we still, there's that niggling part of our brain that says, but what if, and we should do this. I brought these two up because I thought there was something fascinating again, as you brought up with Ed and Lorraine. Lorraine was held to a different set of standards.
Yep.
The Fox sisters and the sisters from the Enfield Poltergeist were held to a different set of standards. And I say that because they were required to perform. And then you have a man like Harry Houdini, who was a magician, an illusionist, self-proclaimed, I am an illusionist. Yet people believed that what he was doing and his abilities came from the supernatural. I have a friend, Sean Paul, and his wife, Juliana Fay, that do a remarkable Victorian age magic show, an illusion program out in I just ran blank in my head and it's killing me. The Illusion Theater. Look it up, folks. You'll love them. And people will leave their show believing that what they saw was paranormal and that they really were. And I think, my God, they believe Harry Houdini was truly tapped into the paranormal, but they will destroy the Fox sisters. They will tear down these two young girls mercilessly. But it must be that Harry Houdini, even though he's telling you, no, here's the card. It's on the back of my hand. Pop, there it is, right? He can show you out, and they still didn't believe him, including one of his best friends, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the man that wrote one of the most logical thinking characters in literary history, Sherlock Holmes, believed that Harry Houdini truly was supernatural in nature, and that some of the magic tricks weren't illusions, but truly alchemy of a different sort. So it is funny how the comparisons, and we don't have to question Houdini because he's supernatural, but these women, they must be up to something. Unless we need their property, then they truly are black magicians. then we're willing to hook that title on them. It's a strange world. And I would just like to say, Alex, on behalf of the men in the world, I'm sorry. What a crap deal this has been for women. And thank you for taking time to write about these incredible women and give them a voice and give them a story to be heard and told again.
Well, thank you for that. I'm hoping that by writing about these women, giving them a moment in the spotlight, one, it makes their names known and they become better known than they were before. But also, I believe in the story of the three deaths. Your physical body dies, and then the last person who knew you die. That's another death, and then the third death is when your name is spoken for the last time. And I'm trying my best to ensure that that third death never happens to these women.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. And I appreciate the effort that you put in, as I'm sure that many of our listeners do across the world. Alex, again, can people reach out to you if they know other stories, uncovered treasure troves of females in the paranormal field?
Absolutely. You can see my handle on screen. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, Twitter, whatever it's called now. You can find me there, and you can also go to my website, send me an email. I'm definitely open to hearing more about other women in the field, and yeah, I'd love to hear stories.
Excellent. Ladies, I'm speaking to you right now, and I hope you're listening, and I know you are. I am shown daily by advertisers and people that I speak to that have no real understanding or knowledge of the field that we do. Many of the advertisers that we've reached out to be a part of this program say our demographic is women, and women don't go in for this stuff. And I tell them, I think you need to reevaluate, because women are attuned to this. Women are very much into this. As a matter of fact, I think the core group of audience for most paranormal programs are women, and there should be more representation, and we should be offering more items that speak to our audience as opposed to just the men that are out there. And you are a legion. You have a voice, and I hope that you're heard. And please do me a favor. Don't give up because you've been told you're not good enough or you're not man enough to do these things. Prove them wrong, right? As Frank Sinatra once said, the best revenge is success. And I know so many women out in the paranormal field that are writing, that are engaging, that are connecting with the other side and making it easier for the rest of us to do. You are bottom of my heart, and I hope that you don't give up. And if you feel weak and you feel like you've lost the encouragement, tune back into the show, write to me, write to Alex, and we'll continue to encourage you to follow your passions and follow this line of new thinking, because this new paradigm is opening every day, and it's because of you. It's built on the shoulders of the women and the women intuition and all of the great researchers that have been behind the men that take all of the accolades. And that's not besmirching any of the men out there that have busted their ass to be seen and heard where they are. But let's now make sure that we also look past those men to see the people that stand in their long shadows, the people that hold that man up so that they do have a shadow to be seen. And I hope that the darkness in the world around us is just a little bit more light with the information we share on this show. I thank you so much for making us a part of your journey, and I hope that you'll be back again with me on Wednesday when we have a little bit of fun and we take a look at the supernatural news from all around the world. Thank you for joining me here, and thank you for being a part of my journey, Alex. And to all of our listeners around the world, thank you for visiting the Paranormal 60.